Good morning
All
from
right.
San Diego here. There's a picture I took of the of Harbor Drive looking at the boat harbor. It's right near the airport. And with us from Dublin is a good friend and speaker leader today, Joseph McGuire. And Ron Cooper from the Washington, D.C. area, and from Hamburger Heaven is Christian Turnetten, in and out. So,
Oh,
what's it like to be on the inside of a big corporation that's wildly popular and fast growing? Must be exciting for you.
it's very exciting. It's fascinating in so many ways. So I have the being inside part. You just about summed it up, Ed. Legendary organization, being inside, fast growing, all of which make it really fascinating and interesting every day. I have a massive task that I have to fulfill to really build and scale this relocation program for all these people to move. And yeah, it's fantastic. I love
Okay, say again, their company is relocating its headquarters or just part of it?
it's well, it's building another headquarters, and the headquarters where I am right now in Irvine that will eventually be gone, eventually being 2029. And a new headquarters in Franklin, Tennessee, outside of Nashville, is being built. And then they will keep another headquarters in California in Baldwin Park, which is where In-N-Out originated. But we're also opening stores in Tennessee, and I'm mostly moving the people that will staff these stores they open at the end of the year around Nashville.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
got several people are joining us from across borders and
Hi,
across
Ken.
cultures. There's Dr. Ken
Hi,
Lloyd. Welcome.
Angie.
You're
Oh,
live. You're live on Global TV this morning. And Angie Weinberger from Zurich. Hello, my friend. Welcome. Say hi.
Hi.
Oh,
Hi,
good.
everyone.
Good. Okay. Joseph McGuire, you know Christian, you know Ron
yeah.
Cooper, Ken Lloyd, of course.
Yep.
Um, I decided to start the show as we're talking as friends because it's a warm and friendly way for strangers who are going to be on the show. Strangers meaning first timers. uh, so today is about, what is today about? Joseph.
Well, you asked me to do two short presentations, Ed, on a couple of recent articles I posted on LinkedIn. One on heart intelligence and heart-based leadership, and the other on executive recruitment or executive interviewing. And to me, they kind of very much go together, slightly different ways. So I have put together a couple of presentations, which will be different to anything I've done before. Um, I I won't particularly be talking about what I normally talk about, which is faces and body language. I will be talking more from a different perspective. Normally, I have a deep loathing of lots of words on slides, but you will see a lot more words than I would normally use just to back up the points. And part of why I'm using the words rather than talking about faces and body languages, because one of the challenges I typically face is people start talking about soft skills, and people in business and people in particular positions in business talk about soft skills, but in a um, very critical way. And soft skills is a term I don't like because to me it's about human skills, human to human skills. And I want to emphasize in everything I do, not just here today, but I want to emphasize the business value of these human skills, which are so often underestimated, undervalued, and the lack of them, hey Paul, and the lack of human skills in action tends to cause a lot of business problems in terms of lack of retention, customer dissatisfaction, stakeholder frustration, um, lack of motivation, etc., etc., etc. So that's essentially where I'm coming from.
Paul Falcone, welcome, my friend. Thank you. I know you're super busy, and I really appreciate you being here.
Anything for you, Ed, and for Joseph. I can't miss a Joseph presentation like this. It's just too important. I'm a wise enough man to know what not to miss.
Well, I want to know what are you doing this week, for instance, in your role as a board member of the American Management Association?
Oh, it's interesting. We had our board meeting not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago. And you know, the funny thing is, they're trying to navigate the new market, I think, just like everybody else is. I mean, a lot of what I do, Ed, is training, management training, leadership development. But that's what they do. They're kind of the Cadillac in the field. They always have been. They've been around for 100 years. But you know, you look at what percentage of their business is government related versus what percentage is private sector related, and you try and find offsets, and you try and diversify, and you try and find new streams of income, new client base. So that's really where they're at these days, which would make sense. I think most companies are in the same mind space.
Let's welcome Meredith. Meredith, first time on the program. We've known each other 20 years, but this is first time on the program.
I
Welcome.
know. Hey, Ed, how are you? Hi, everyone. So nice to
Hello.
meet you.
So
Thanks
Meredith, you're in
thanks for inviting me.
Texas, right?
I'm in Houston, Texas. Yep.
Right. Okay. And you've just taken a big new job with my friend Brian Friedman.
I did. I just joined an organization, Benevo. So I'm super excited to be here.
So Benevo is tech,
Tech.
as applied to mobility and HR stuff, right?
Right. It's a purpose-built technology platform to support organizations with the mobilization and transparency of their workforce on an international and domestic level.
Boy, that's a mouthful. Welcome.
Yeah, it is, right?
Welcome, John Varico.
Hey, John.
Oh, you're on mute. Hard to believe you're on mute. Wow. Hi, John.
Not
Speak.
normal for John to be mute.
Okay, when you're ready, John. Oh, no, not ready. Ken Lloyd, what's doing in Studio City?
I don't know. I'm in Encino, but
Oh, Encino. Oh. Was there an earthquake? Did you move? Well,
no, been here for a lot of years. So anyhow,
okay.
just continuing, if you will, the process, doing some one-on-one career type exec coaching things, and continuing the writing on different projects, and enjoying your podcast immensely. This looks like such a great group today. And Meredith, welcome. Let me tell you, I'm looking at the other players on this team. They're really wonderful people. You're definitely going to enjoy this. And I've heard Joseph speak before. You're in for a real treat. And I agree with Paul. Wouldn't miss a presentation by Joseph.
I'm
Yeah,
excited.
so
Thank
yeah,
you.
we're going to begin. The show will extend 60 to 75 minutes, but I know people are really busy, and so you can jump out anytime, and we'll send you the program when it's ready. Who is HP? Says HP has entered the waiting room. Wow. Who is this going to be? A mystery.
It was Patrick.
Well, maybe. We'll see what happens. Anyway, Meredith, what is your job? You're going to be calling on corporations?
Yeah, so my current role right now, I am in global client development, and very similar to, some of my former roles, or I'm actually doing more of a consulting type position with organizations that have globally mobile workforces. So really trying to understand the infrastructure of their companies, how are they moving their people, what types of tools, transparency, cost, what is it that they're really looking to achieve, and how are they looking to elevate that experience, not only for their employees, but also for their organizations. And the coolest thing is, obviously AI has been all the talk. I'm probably like opening a can of worms on this one, but for the larger group, it's here, it's been here, and the utilization of AI is becoming highly integrated within the platform of Benevo.
It's very interesting. There's a London-based publisher that I've known for about 10 years. His name is Courtney, and he owns a company called FDI Alliance, Foreign Direct Investment Alliance. And he's a publisher. He's selling ads, of course, but he does a beautiful job in print as well as online. And I've been fortunate to be asked by him to write articles from time to time about economic development and the role of relocation in FDI, foreign direct investment. So the newest article I've been working on for about 10 days is I finished it last night and going to send it off to the publisher later today, and it will be coming out on or about August 1. I'll send it to you.
I
And
love that.
it turned out that I was walking through the San Diego Convention Center. This is real brief, and then we'll get to Joseph. But SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management, gave me for the 26th year a press pass to walk around and get people to want to talk about why they're at SHRM. And I published that post-event. They want the publicity from the event to go forward because most people, there was 26,000 people walking around, they say, and they go home and they forget about SHRM, or San Diego SHRM. So they want me to publicize what went on. So my job was to walk around the exhibit hall, introduce myself, had this huge press pass that says media. And I said, listen, I'm here for the 26th year doing this kind of thing. Do you want to be interviewed? Do you want to come on global TV talk shows sometime this summer and talk about your experience at the SHRM convention? And nobody said no. And so one of the company's executives that I interviewed is with a big relocation company called Alexander's Mobility.
Yeah, familiar with them.
Based in California. It's an Atlas member. So when I first did California Bound a very long time ago, 1980 was the first edition, after I relocated myself and the idea to LA from Boston, I called it California Bound. Atlas Van Lines was a major advertiser and supporter right away, which of course I was grateful for. Anyway, so the guys were there in the exhibit hall. It was like a long-time reunion. And they said, well, when are you going to do these live meetings again that you did a long time ago? I said, well, do you want to help pay for it? I'll do it. And you'll be the exclusive in your category, guaranteed. Here's where I want to do it. Washington, Manhattan, Miami, Houston, Chicago, Mountain View, Irvine, Marina Del Rey, which is right near Silicon Beach in LA, and LAX, and San Diego. Actually, La Jolla, we're going to dress it up and go upscale. So they said, yes, we'll do them all. And so, well, okay, now here's a goodie. I've been asked by this London publisher to put together an article about why relocating here is a good idea. So I'm looking for help around the country. Why don't you help me get me that info, and I'll put it together and I'll publish it, and I'm going to give you an ad in there. Free.
There you go.
No
Whatever
expense.
you need, Ed.
In return for helping me do my meetings, which of course
Right.
will help, in a derivative way going forward.
Right.
So all this came together, all within the same time frame. It's like heaven sent. And so finally, I was able to marshal the resources of, get this, Google and AI. And I asked the prompt, and I wasn't drinking or smoking anything. It just came to me out of the blue. I said so the prompt was, why is relocating to Washington, D.C. Metro a good idea? I got this long thing, like 3 minutes later. And then I did the same thing for California, and I got even bigger. And then I did it for Dallas, Fort Worth. So that's the gist of the article. I'm certainly promoting it here, but it's just the idea of AI and what could be done if it's done right. And so I edited what it sent. And so the result of all this talk will be published. AI, Joseph, how are you using AI?
I'm still probably a late entrant, Ed, to be perfectly honest. I do use ChatGPT quite a bit, but I've learned to train it rather than expect anything from it. And that to me is the key. If you don't train it, it will do what it wants to do. It may be wildly inaccurate, and that can be so destructive for one's reputation, never mind anything else. So ChatGPT is largely as far as I've gone so far, but I'm not by any means averse to using AI. I'm starting to have conversations with people who are far more evolved in that space than I am, so who can give me very clear and correct advice rather than me blundering around.
Meredith is working for this company, Benevo, and those guys are experts. And
But Joseph's correct,
they're not
Ed.
paying me anything. They're not a customer. I just
No,
know some of
no.
the principles, but that is a truth.
Yeah, I mean, but Joseph is right. I mean, exactly what he just said, what most individuals, and obviously, I don't come from an IT background. I come from an international background, in multiple different ranges supporting HR, right? So, but learning here and learning very quickly that your bots have to be trained. So yes, you can go online and ask, and just like what Joseph said. However, you've got to train that bot and it gets to know you more and more and more. And so that's one of the things that Benevo has done with their bots. They're actually training these bots and it's actually going next level. So we have a huge reveal coming up with our next level AI intelligence called mobility intelligence. And that's coming up this month. So I can't give it away, but it's pretty cool. But that's what exactly what Joseph is saying, is that you train these bots, you work with these bots, and a lot of these organizations, as they get deeper and deeper into using AI, and they're looking at the complexities of it and how it can cut time or make administrative tasks a little bit more streamlined functionality, that what I call the Amazon effect, that most of our younger generation, I know I have a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old, I know exactly how they operate. I want my car fixed in an hour. It doesn't happen, but these bots allow that opportunity.
Interesting. Ron Cooper, are you using AI yet?
I do. And I want to ask an ethical question, and it's in the context of writing an article, that if ChatGPT actually wrote the article, can a person put written by ethically? Can you do that? Because it's my opinion that yes, if 90% of what went into the article, the book, the whatever I'm writing is my thinking, and I just had ChatGPT clean it up a little bit, I guess I'm okay with that. But yet, if ChatGPT wrote 1,000 words, just pick a number, and I say written by Ron Cooper, I don't think that's ethical. And so, but I'm interested in anyone's thought.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking about also. And so it says, I'm the organizer of all this information, but I had help from Alexander's and their resources. And I asked Google AI to give me information. So I was just reading the other day, 2 days ago, Goldman Sachs is forcing all the employees to learn AI, and or they're firing. Either do it or you're out. We're going to make this work. But I quoted that the source of the information was Google AI, but I edited it, black and white right there. And I think that's sufficient. Joseph, have you met John Verico?
Oh, indeed, many times. John and I know each other very well. Absolutely.
Good, good. Okay, I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. So Joseph, I asked Joseph to put some slides together. Joseph, are you ready to use my screen share?
Absolutely, Ed. Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll do one. and then we'll have, so you talk for 5, 8 minutes or whatever time you need. And then we're going to have a discussion about what people think about that. And then we'll do the next one. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Yeah, see where I have it.
There we go. Looks like it's going to work.
There we go. Okay. Like I said, I don't normally use lots of words on slides. I tend to have a distinctive version to it, but today, unfortunately, you're going to be treated to lots of words rather than too many images. This is an excerpt from research, the Corporate Executive Board, and yes, I know they were bought over by Gartner in 2017, but those figures still appear to apply from all the other research I've done. So it's that bit about the 50 to 70% of executives fail within 18 months of taking on a role, regardless of whether they're external or promoted from within, and that to me is absolutely shocking. Depending on the research you look at, the figures vary from 40 to 70%, but it's always somewhere within that figure. And there are multiple reasons why that happens, and there are multiple recurring reasons, which quite frankly shock me. But the problems seem to just be repeated time and time again. And I came across a report by Navalent there recently, where they said that of the 50 whatever percent fail, 3% fail spectacularly, and 50% struggle quietly. And the 3% is shocking in itself, but the 50% struggling quietly, that to me rings alarm bells, because it tells me people are operating in isolation and haven't built relationships. And that again, that recurs time and time and time again. But in terms of this first presentation, I'm just really going to talk about where I fit in the executive interviewing space. Typically, I'm called to sit in on an interview, whether that's in person or online like this. And it's either because the company has had experience of hiring precisely the wrong person or people in the past, or because they have candidates of apparently equal value and they can't determine between them in terms of who is the right fit. And one thing I've learned, again, to my shock really over the years, is that so many interviewers are not trained to interview. They don't have the skills to interview properly. We know that whether you call it a curriculum vitae, CV, or resume, they can be scripted, sculpted, doctored to present a very appealing image, as can psychometric tests. Psychometric tests are very widely used. There's a whole range of them. But one of the flaws in psychometric tests is that it's typically the candidate who fills it out, gives an assessment of themselves, and then the panel or the interviewer, whichever it is, work from that. And even if the psychometric test is done with great integrity and great accuracy, it doesn't tell you how the person is actually going to perform if they are appointed. It's an outline picture, if you like, of who they actually are, but it doesn't tell you how they will perform. One other flaw that comes up in the interview process is that people get biased either for or against the image. They like how people present themselves, how people look, how people sound. They like it if people have the same hobbies or similar hobbies and similar likes to them. And again, this comes up time and time and time again. Where this is really where I come in. I don't need to know the job specs, but I do need to know about the culture of the company. I do need to know about the responsibilities the candidate will take on. I do need to know about who they're likely to be working with. And then when it comes to the interview itself, for me, an interview is an interrogation. An interview is not a quiet, cozy conversation. An interview is an interrogation. And to be clear about that, that does not mean throwing people up against the wall and, punching their lights out or anything like that. And if you speak to anybody who has an interrogation background, they will tell you that the best interrogation is actually takes a softer approach. It's about building rapport, it's about building empathy, but it's also digging beneath the surface. And some of the key areas you need to know about when you're interviewing a candidate is how they will respond under pressure, because it's guaranteed that if they get the job, if they're taken on, they will experience pressure. And the pressure can come from multiple directions. So you have to understand how they will respond under pressure. You have to understand what their communication skills are like generally, but also under pressure, and what's their decision making like under pressure. So part of the process of an interview is not just asking standard questions. It's not just asking nice questions. It's asking difficult questions. And it's typically keeping those questions brief, because that's another flaw that often comes up in the interview, that the interviewer asks elongated questions, which makes them the focus of the interview, and lacks precision, lacks clarity. So ideally the questions will be concise. And one of the key roles for an interviewer is to learn to shut up. And one thing I've learned over the years is to be very comfortable and relaxed with silence. And I will typically use silence quite frequently in an interview. And I will vary the silence. Sometimes I will just sit back and I'll kind of hold my chin. Sometimes I'll smile, and sometimes I'll have a very stern face and lean forward. And it's all done strategically. But when we leave a prolonged silence, generally speaking, most people feel compelled to speak. And I will use that silence after they've given me an answer I'm not particularly satisfied with. An answer that's either too smooth, too polished, or that omits something I want to know about. So I will hold the silence. And research that I've read, certainly about people in Europe, indicates that as a rule, people in Europe are comfortable with silence for up to 8 seconds. I can be comfortable with silence for a lot longer than that. And so many people are really uncomfortable with it. And like I said, feel compelled to speak. And typically when they speak, they will reveal something not only that they had not intended to say, but how they say it will be revealing. Changes in breathing pattern, changes in rhythm of speech, changes in tonality, changes in cadence will all be very revealing, and will indicate whether you need to ask something deeper again and go back into another silence. So it's very, very important to see not just the interview, not just as an interrogation, but as a set of strategic steps if you want to find out who the real person is, to determine whether they're likely to fit the culture of the company as it is, but also the culture going forward. And like I said, whether they have the communication skills in general, but whether they have the communication skills under pressure, and the capacity to deal comfortably, calmly, and confidently with pressure. And especially in today's world, with all the changes happening, we know pressure is an inevitability. Like I said, I use silence a lot. And I've come across so many people on interview panels who are not comfortable with silence. So that's part of the preparation for me, is when I'm working with the panel, is I have to do some prep work to get to know who they are, what's their approach, and to ensure that they are prepared to be comfortable with silence in the interview process. And the selection of the panel is also important. It's not always the most necessary, the most relevant, or the most appropriate people who are on the panel. And it's often the case, again, I don't understand it, but it's often the case that people who are not directly relevant to the position to be filled who are on the panel. It's not necessarily people who are going to be directly involved with the appointee. And often the people who are likely to be involved, the team who are going to be involved with the appointee, are often not even consulted in the process, in the recruitment process. So there are a lot of flaws. You could go off in multiple directions about it. But again, just to reiterate the point, using silence strategically is an absolutely essential part in the interview process.
We have two questions, Christian and John Verico. Christian?
I'll just stop the share there anyway, because that's all of those ones.
Oh,
Oh, thank you.
thank you very much, Joseph. That was amazing. The question I have is, if you have an interviewee who is sort of kind of trained in what you just said and uses silence as well strategically, how, as an interviewer, do you make sure that you get the information that you need out of them within the time that you have, which typically isn't all that much?
Yep, that's a great question.
So you don't just have a lot of silence and at the cost of information being exchanged.
Yeah, typically when I'm called in, I will pre-position it with the company that this may take longer than normal. If you want me to do it properly, if you want to do it thoroughly, and you want to ensure you get the right candidate, let's not put that standard time limit on it of an hour, 45 minutes, or whatever it may be. And if necessary, it will be a series of interviews.
That makes sense.
And I will emphasize the importance of getting it right, particularly if they've got it wrong in the past. And one thing I've learned for me is to really step up and be very confident in what I'm stating to the company. And many of you will probably have found this out in your own work already, is that even if somebody has achieved a position of success in the company, it may be a very high level, doesn't mean they're confident. It doesn't mean they really trust or believe in themselves. So if you face them with confidence and you're clear and you're calm, it's much easier to persuade.
Thanks.
John?
The magician has a question.
How you doing, Joe? So great to see you, man. Hey, this is all fantastic information, and I absolutely love what you're saying. You mentioned one thing, though, that I wanted to ask about, and that was, obviously it's important to have people who are going to be directly related to the individual or directly working with the individual on the panel. Makes absolute sense. You don't want just random folks or the HR people who have no clue what really happens necessarily in there. However, I have found, and I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes to have one person there who's not going to be a direct report or not going to be directly interacting with that person, but, maybe be tangentially having to deal with that or would be, the recipient of the results of what that person is working on. To have somebody else in there who's somewhat separated so they can come with a completely unbiased view of the individual. Does that, how can you work the mechanics of that? And do you see a benefit of doing that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the word bias. Bias plays such a role in interviews, or commonly plays such a role in interviews, bias for or against. And again, I've come across it so often, and the research backs it up, that interviewers can take a dislike to somebody. Like in terms of what I normally do, where I'm reading faces and body language and all of that. Yeah. We register, I've said it before, but we register faces in something like 1/17 of a second. And we tell ourselves a story about the person whose face we're looking at. And that could be positive or negative. They could remind us of somebody we strongly like or strongly dislike.
Yeah.
And that can color our perception of the whole conversation. And again, it comes up so often in interviews that people make decisions based on how somebody looks, or they've got the same hobbies, they're part of the same club, or whatever it might be, or they dislike how somebody looks, or they dislike their hobbies. It's mind-blowing, but it happens time and again. So
Yeah, and so I know somebody who
eliminating-
lost the director job because she had a tattoo.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's so important to eliminate bias from the interviewer or the panel as far as possible. And that's part of the preparation, and making sure that there are relevant people on the panel. And whether that's a panel of 3 people or 5 people, which I think 5 is unwieldy, but
Yeah.
ideally we 3. And if you can have somebody who's likely to be tangentially involved, who can be as ideally entirely objective if that's possible, but at least reasonably objective and not getting caught up in precisely those biases that we talked about, then that's ideal.
Angie, would you like to
Thank you.
jump in here?
Thanks, Joseph. I think that was very insightful. Although I'm thinking, I don't want to be interviewed by you. I'm scared.
Angie, I'm thinking I want him to interview me so I'm like incredibly
You can
better
sort of
at
show
that.
yourself.
We could have a practice
I'm all
interview.
in on
occasion.
Joseph right now.
Just the lot of things resonated with me. Where I was surprised, what I was surprised to hear was that you said the psychometric tests don't give an indication of performance, because at least here in Switzerland they're widely used. And I mean, okay, we also ask for references, which, you know, we also know there's a very low validity for references. And I was also quite, not shocked, but sad about hearing that 50% of managers struggle quietly, which, and also, you know, the confidence topics that you touched on. I think from coaching executives and expats, I can completely see that this is happening. Not always for work reasons. Sometimes it's also for reasons of balance or not feeling. I think one of the reasons why a lot of people struggle that I work with is because they don't feel aligned with their purpose enough. Like they work hard, but they work hard, they spend their energy on the wrong things, basically. And I think that's really scary, you know, if you think about it. I mean, we've touched on this topic of the loneliness epidemic already a few times on these calls. But, you know, if we think about it, the managers, the senior executives, if they feel they're struggling, how are they supposed to show up for their teams? How are they supposed to make a difference? And will a good recruiting process change that? Mm-hmm. Or is the issue deeper? Do we need to have a bigger change? Coming back to what you said initially, you know, do we need to look into the human skills more? I don't really want to talk about the AI in depth, but I think for me it has also created a bit of loneliness at work, because I've replaced my interns with ChatGPT. Not a smart move from a human perspective. So yeah,
Meredith.
that's what resonated here.
Thanks, Angie.
Yeah, great point, Angie. Yeah, so Joseph, you made some really interesting, you know, points in what you were saying. And so I wanted to kind of relate to 2 things that you were talking about. So one thing, the interview process, you're 100% correct. I mean, I've just recently gone through that specific process, you know, looking at, you know, these higher level roles and positions within organizations based on my skill set. And I actually went into an interview thinking I was interviewing for one role. There was a surprise person in there that I didn't know about, which was fine because I typically do my research. But absolutely during the interview, it got sabotaged by this one individual. And, you know, it was incredible. And the conversation was going well. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's focusing on one skill set that wasn't even in any of the description. But then come to find out, I also was given the wrong description and role for the job. So what I thought I was interviewing for was not exactly what I was interviewing for. So, you know, those are things that I call like non-preparation. And I feel like from your point two and what you're discussing, which goes to point two, you know, is that I find that a lot of organizations and a lot of people, when they're looking at these higher level positions, they, you know, they don't come prepared. They don't come prepared. They don't do the research. They haven't read the person's, you know, resume or their LinkedIn profile. And, you know, to your point in being quiet, because you're listening to me right now, you obviously can tell I'm an expressive, you know, individual in my speaking style. But you know, I think as someone that's looking for, you know, these roles, like what you're talking about and what you're doing, and you're talking about the culture, you're talking about the vision, you're talking about the strategy of the organization, you know, what is the counterparts like? What is their leadership like? How is this role going to impact the organization? You know, I would think it would be clear that when you're coming into these interviews that you would have at least 3 of your top goals to achieve with that individual in order to uncover. So my question for you is that something that you see often where organizations are actually coming in, or are you helping them guide them in that respect so that you can really fine tune, focus on the 3 top core elements that would make a strategic difference within the organization? Because that's really what it's about, is finding the right individual that will fit in, but also it's going to make the biggest impact. So do you find that people prepare for that? Do you normally have these goals in advance? And you know, how do you go about doing that? A lot of questions in one. So hope you don't mind me asking.
So, you know, Joseph, if I can just jump in here, do you think that the idea that was just expressed here, that there's somebody wings it or appears to be winging it, meaning somebody in the company who's doing the interview, to try to screw up the person, the victim, and see how they react under that kind of pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. And to follow on from what Meredith just asked, and also Angie just put in the chat there that recruitment is flawed. And recruitment is so often very badly flawed that the company, it's often the case that the right stakeholders in the company are not involved in the recruitment process to begin with, to determine what's required. The recruiters are not necessarily properly informed. Companies also often use the same recruiters because they use the same recruiters, and they're creatures of habit. The recruitment companies are also, and I've had enough conversations with them, they're also more about numbers frequently than actual quality. And they'll just send as many candidates as they can. Not all companies, but so often it happens that recruitment companies will send as many candidates as they possibly can. So that's part of the problem. Then to Meredith's questions, when I'm being brought on board, I have to understand what the priorities are. Absolutely. What are the top priorities for the successful candidate? What are the expectations? Not only talking about their decision-making skills, communication skills, but what's the vision for the company going forward, 6 months, a year, etc. And how do they need to show up? What are the metrics that will show that they are successful and that they have not just fitted in, but that they have brought the company forward? And what are the qualities they need to show for that? So I have to know about that. And then we have to focus on that in the interview process. And I talked about, I used an image of an interrogation room, and it can look quite sinister. I do get that. I don't know if I've talked about this in another presentation, but have any of you been to Disney World in Florida? So, okay.
Long time ago.
Well, you need to go again, Christian. So in Disney World in Florida, there's a place called, is it Cinderella's Magic Kingdom or Cinderella's Magic Castle? I can't remember which it is, but there's a wonderful mosaic in there, and it's designed by a guy called Hans Scharf. And for anybody who hasn't heard of Hans Scharf was the Luftwaffe's leading interrogator in the Second World War, and he had a different approach to what we typically know of as interrogation, because particularly if you're in a prisoner of war camp, if you're brought in for interrogation, you expect to be beaten and punched and threatened and all of that. But Hans Scharf would be brought in, and he would be typically brought in where Allied prisoners, Allied pilots and officer corps pilots were kept. And what he would do is he would take them out of the prison barracks, and he would take them for a walk around the perimeter of the camp, and he would give them chocolates or cigarettes or whatever, and he would just have what were apparently very pleasant conversations as they walked, and all very friendly and jovial. But he had an ability to ferret information out of people without them realizing what he was doing. And it was all very gentle. It was all very soft spoken. But he would typically do something like throw in a half fact about something he was interested in or he wanted to know about, or throw in a mistake about something. For example, like the weaponry used, and like the different colors on tracer bullets used in the planes. And the Germans didn't understand why tracer bullets had different colors. But he threw in a deliberate mistake. And what he learned was that the color of the tracer bullets told the pilots when they were almost out of ammunition. And different colors informed them about the level of ammunition they still had. So things like that brought literally elicited information that the Germans needed and the pilots didn't realize they were giving. After the war, Hans Scharf was brought to the US, and he was brought in to train what was then the beginnings of the CIA, and train the FBI in interrogation tactics. So a lot of the tactics that are used in interrogation processes now came from him. So if you're in Disney World in Florida, do have a look at the mosaic, because he was also a distinguished mosaic artist as well. But there's a distinct correlation there.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear what Paul Falcone has to say.
Oh, I can't either. Joseph, that was a fabulous story. I'm going to look him up. That's really interesting to me. So the thing is, I had written a book called 96 Great Interview Questions to Ask Before You Hire. And it's been around for 20 years. It's in its third edition. It's been translated into multiple languages. But what I'll say is this, and Joseph, to your point, you've got to get the candidate to become comfortable in that meeting. And I tell people, the relationship isn't ready yet. To begin with, tell me your greatest strength, and jumping into all this Q&A, you're going to get arm's length responses. You're not going to get to know the real person. So spend the first 5 minutes asking them questions about themselves. What appealed to you when you saw this ad? Tell me where you are in your career search right now. How's that coming along? I haven't been in the open market myself in several years. So what's it like out there as a candidate? And what are the 2 or 3 criteria you're using in selecting your next company or your next position? Like, what's important to you at this point in your career? And before you know it, after only 3 or 4 questions, you'll get kind of this feeling of, they sit up in their chair and they say, you know what, Ed, I normally don't say this in an interview, but. And once you get to that point, you've got the real candidate. You've got the person behind the hype. Because if their body language is closed and they feel like you're hitting them with a machine gun's worth of questions, and that it's a tennis match where you're playing back and forth, you're only going to get so far with the person. But if they feel like, you know what, he's into career and professional development, and he asked me questions about me, and I'm not even hired there yet. Well, if we realize Gen Y and Gen Z are looking for career and professional development as one of their top 5 motivators, priorities, so to speak, in every survey I've ever seen, inject that into the interviewing process. You know, I give you permission not to ask silly questions about, if you could be a fish, what fish would you want to be? Don't ask those questions. ask questions about what's important to them and do it at the beginning. And you'll get different answers and a whole different relationship built with that candidate so that you know the real person by the end of the meeting.
Christian, you've just been through an exhaustive interview process with ups and downs, and now you're flipping hamburgers. So
I'm flipping roles also. I'm actually hiring, and I've interviewed, and you know, whenever Joseph speaks, I can think of all the stuff that I screwed up on, but I can improve on. Silence being the most important one of it. What Paul just said, it really did resonate with me. The people I've interviewed with at In-N-Out know that. Whether they've read Paul's book, they may have. They're very savvy HR professionals, but they definitely know. And In-N-Out has a culture that is extremely, personal, family friendly. It's always one of the best employers in the US, in Glassdoor ratings and other US World News, I think is another one. And that's because the culture is genuinely very friendly and open. And the interviews do reflect that. Having said that, they also use questions similar to what Paul just said to find out whether the candidate fits the culture. Culture is at least as, if not more important than skill. In-N-Out definitely hires for skill. They can get the best of the best with their reputation and also the way they pay. But if you're not the right fit for the culture, it doesn't matter how qualified you are, how nice you are, how much people like you, you will get rejected because of that. So it's kind of what the two of you just said, Joseph and Paul. I can should combine that as I'm continuing to find a candidate to support me, because I have more work than I can handle. Going forward, I'm sure I'll also be brought in for interviews as a part of a panel in the future.
Ken?
Can I put another spin on this? Because this is all very interesting. And Paul, I agree with you. I mean, some of those questions, I mean, they're amazing to get the individual to feel comfortable and, feel like, you're truly interested in them. But I also see that this candidate market, they're shopping organizations as well, and they're looking for what's best for them. So even though, you may be doing the interviewing, they're also interviewing you as well. And I feel like it's become a two-way street, and that's become a very common practice, especially with the younger generations, looking at their careers, and change is okay with them. They're fine with that, because that's how they've lived, TikTok, check it out. Right. So, I mean, and I feel like, that is shifting in how the interviewing process is going as well. Very back to Paul's point, in asking those relatable questions, and same with you, Christian, it's about culture first. So, I mean, I'd love to get some feedback from the rest of, these highly educated individuals that I'm sitting here talking to, and get your spin on that, what you feel. Ed, you too.
Ken first.
Just want to see how you handle the silence, that's all. Yeah, there's so many good points have come out on this discussion right from the outset. Looking at the resume and recognizing what a resume or a Vita or CV is, it's an advertisement. And look carefully for inconsistencies, for covering. For example, I'd say, well, from 2020 to 2023, I worked at, well, wait a minute though, is that January 2020 or was it December? The same thing for 2023. Is it a number of years? Is it actually 4? Is it 3? Is it, what is it? And you'll see if you read carefully inconsistencies. Remember, for the most part, these resumes are not written by the individual. They're either professionally written by an outside resume writer, or maybe AI or ChatGPT wrote it for them. To be very careful in reading it and not jump to conclusions, positive or negative, but recognize that it's an advertising document. then when you're actually doing the interview, certainly Joseph's points, Paul's points, excellent points, and just to add their points that need to be made in terms of how you ask the questions. You don't want to do a lot of yes or no questions because you're leading, if you will, you're leading the candidate. Did you have to work hard? Yeah, I did. Did you meet your goals? Yes. Did you like this? Did you like it? All a bunch of yes, no's. You're interviewing yourself. Using questions, how, when, what, where, why, will get far more open-ended and positive in terms of interpretive answers. In other words, what did you like most about that job? And not, did you like it? Yeah, I liked it. Oh, great. First line is a positive attitude. They liked it. What did you like the most? And that can be just very revealing. When people identify their likes and dislikes, they're actually talking about their motivations. Was it the achievement, the recognition, the responsibility, the advancement, the interaction? What are they saying that they liked? They'll give you insights into what's really ticking and clicking for them and what they don't like. And that can help you match that individual with the organization. But to go through the process and not just leading them, but keeping it open. Remember, interviewers have read that, hey, you know, the more the interviewer talks, the more the interviewer likes you. You got to be careful of that. As Meredith did say, they are interviewing us. At the same time, they can be playing us. And we have to be careful. Suddenly we're talking too much in the interview. And yeah, I like this person. Of course you did. You got to talk all the time, but that's just a bias. And to Joseph's point about biases, there's no question about it. That there are elements of their work history, their appearance, their behaviors that can remind you of positive and negative experiences that you might have had. So to be aware of that. I mean, look, there was a teacher in grammar school I couldn't stand. She didn't like me, and if I had to interview someone who reminded me of her, I know, okay, watch it, Ken. This person is just like Miss So-and-so. Don't let that happen. And to make sure the questions that you're asking are certainly in the US legal. You're not probing into, you know, what are your marriage plans? Tell me about your partner. Are you planning on having children? All that stuff, not related to the job. You can learn a great deal about the individual, but focusing on job-related questions, specifically their work history. That's where a lot of this information can be so valuable to you. So I just think the information, chiming in with that, the information that we're getting to you is extremely helpful for doing productive interviews. Just side story, my dad used to always have my mom interview the individual. But yeah, hey, do you want to go to dinner? She was very perceptive. She could read people like Joseph extremely well and could gather very important data. And look, if you have people on your team that are a little more sensitive to that, to have them sitting in on the interview, that's great. Be very valuable and helpful for you.
Well, I need to ask Christian a question. Are the kids that you have on window duty, you know, for the drive-in, different than the people at the cash register? Or does that job rotate? Are the skill sets different?
Yes, they have. So the way In-N-Out works is they have different levels of skill, and that corresponds to a job level as well. So Windows is a different level from cash register, is a different level from fries, is a different level from burgers, the grill. That's the kind of the highest because you need the most skill. It's actually, I had a store day where I got to experiment with it and try it myself, and it's actually quite difficult to get it right. And yes, so they, I can't tell you exactly where they fall, but just know, yes, they have different levels. They level up just like you would in a computer game. The more skills they have, the higher up they get.
Paul, could you jump in on that topic?
You know, I can. If it has to do with the interview, I'm always happy to. That's interesting, Christian. I assume that was the case. And the only other thing I'd say, too, to add to this conversation is where people haven't been trained, there's two areas. Number one, as an interviewer, they don't have the critical mass. They don't know what questions to ask. What are the top 10 questions you're asking a salesperson? What are the top 5 questions that you believe are important for a college grad? coming into an internship program, or for a senior executive, or for a tech person who's an individual contributor. You have to be able to give some thought to that and find your own voice in that. The second thing I'd say is what people get wrong, Ed, over and over again is behavioral questions, behavior-based questions. These are wonderful tools, but they're used the wrong way. They're meant to be follow-on, not lead-in questions. So if you say to someone, what do you like least about your job? And they say, I hate having to fire people. I'm like, yeah, me too. Well, tell me about the last time that happened. What were the circumstances and how did it go? And all of a sudden you get off the Q&A of the, the typical rhythm of the interview, because now you're going deep into a rabbit hole, but you're asking them questions about how they decide things and how they treated the person and what would they do differently if they could have. The problem is too many people think that they're lead-in questions. And I went to an interview once where it was remote, and it was a senior vice president of human resources who was interviewing me, who asked me 60 minutes worth of, give me an example of a time when, give me an example of a time when, give me an example of a time when. Well, first of all, after about 30 minutes, I was just making stuff up because you just, you're just on overload. But when I hung up that call, I thought, you know what? She didn't know me 1 inch better than when I started the interview with her an hour ago, because she never got to know me, the person. And if the real skill in interviewing is matching the individual's personality to the company's culture or the department's culture,
Exactly.
she just wasted everybody's time. Now, I did get that job and I did accept it, but that's not the point. The point is you would think at that level, especially in HR, these people would know how to build human relationship and trust right from the very beginning. And because it was all behavior-based questions, which had no connection to me as a person other than being able to answer the questions, they didn't really get anything out of it. My
They
opinion.
hadn't read your book.
There, I like the way you're thinking, Christian. And yes, In and Out is a client, and I did training for them, so I'm glad to hear
So there
that
you
stuff
go.
is something that you sense. That's so funny. Yeah.
John, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did actually. But I wanted to add to what Paul was just talking about. Those questions as you're getting into when you kind of deep dive into certain areas, that's what really helps to break out their critical thinking skills. And when it comes down to it, for any job, whenever I've done any hiring, my focus was to understand the person, their personality, and how they think and their critical thinking skills, because I can train them on the other stuff. You don't need to be able to necessarily know the business or the work itself. I mean, yeah, it all helps, but I really want to understand your approach to learning and how you make decisions. And that's how I know if you're malleable enough to fit in to the kind of organization that that I'm working with.
I
And so
love
that's
that
always very
word,
great.
malleable. Wow, that's great. Great word.
Yeah, I looked that one up. Okay.
I was wondering whether you got AI to help you with that word.
No. I see that. I don't use it. I don't, and I'm still the guy who uses AI like Google. I mean, I just really don't take advantage of it. And maybe I'll have to have a conversation with Joseph or somebody to how to learn how to do that a little better and how to train it. But anyway, unfortunately, folks, I do have to jump.
I do
It looks
too.
like,
I do too.
but this is fantastic. It's wonderful seeing familiar faces and old friends again, and I look forward to catching up.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to watch the rest of the recording so I don't miss any of the rest of this great stuff.
We have 15 minutes remaining. Joseph, what's your next slide?
Yes, well, firstly, it's an absolute pleasure to see everybody, and
Gotta go.
sorry you have to depart. Just to follow up, particularly from on what Paul was saying, I absolutely agree with everything he said. I normally would anyway, but and I'm not just being nice in saying that. But that whole the importance of establishing rapport is essential, and I would never go in. I probably overemphasize the whole thing of interrogation. I would never go in with a hard edge, because that's not the point. That's not serving anybody. It is about establishing rapport. It is about creating a degree of empathy. It is about the candidate being relaxed so that they're more likely to reveal themselves, because if they feel they're being threatened or being pushed, it derails the interview straight away. It's only if they feel, and feel is an operative word here, if they feel or if I feel they're being evasive or not disclosing something that's relevant, that I will start to bring in the silence, etc. But in terms of the reading faces and body language and all of that, it is absolutely essential to create rapport from the beginning, because I need to know what we call their baseline behavior. And then I'm paying attention to changes in facial expression, changes in breathing patterns, changes in tonality, pacing, etc. Changes in how they say what they say. So that's where all of that comes in. But without the rapport, you don't get that, because it's awkward from the word go, and that serves nobody.
Wow.
Um,
So
so
much.
I just go back to the share and just, so I think this is this one. I'll just look to go through these fairly quickly, because there's a lot more words than anything on these. It would help if the technology complied. Sorry, there we go. I just love this image. I did use it on a recent post, and it was stimulated by this quote. I'd never heard of Howard G. Hendricks before, but he was a professor of theology. I just love this as a description of leadership, because if you have a magnet and a compass in your being, then you have a very clear focus on direction, but you also attract the right people. So that's what particularly appeals to me about that. I have such an aversion to using lots of words on slides, but there's just a couple of particular points there in this one. And it's just to emphasize the business value of human skills. That's it. Empathy, communication skills, the ability to cultivate trust, all of those things. If we have those, we're building a solid business case. Very simply, it's not about being nice, because being nice goes nowhere. I think it was Carl Jung described sentimentality as a great cruelty, and I can fully identify with that. That if we get into being overly nice and being too empathetic when there's a hard decision to be made, again, we're failing the business and we're failing the people. And again, the thing of heart-centered leadership. I've followed a lot of the research that the HeartMath Institute has done, but again, going to the bottom line there, the Forrester research, like, client satisfaction is greater. And particularly in today's world, where business has become so competitive and people are so stressed and frustrated and energized by the whole thing of tariffs and what's going to happen and the uncertainty around it. Customer satisfaction, client satisfaction is one of the absolute key metrics we have to bear in mind. And again, the emphasis on trust-based leadership, heart-based leadership, if we get it right, can make a massive difference.
So, Joseph, may I ask, how, step one, before trust, there has to be rapport, right?
Yeah.
Before rapport, there has to be what, in your words?
There has to be a willingness to listen. There has to be a willingness to learn. There has to be a willingness and an ability to communicate. And communicate is two ways. Communicate works two ways. I'm just going to go to this slide here. Communication starts with the non-verbal. And this is an image from HeartMath, their research. And what their research has demonstrated, and this is hard science, that the heart's magnetic field can be measured somewhere between 5 and 10 feet away from the body. So before we speak, our heart is communicating. The heart develops before the brain in embryo. So before we speak, we're communicating. And if we are in a positive state, if we are in an empathetic state, we are triggering a mirror neuron response in the person we're speaking to or the people we're speaking to. So we're creating an atmosphere, an environment of positivity and potential connection, potential rapport. Then there's how we speak. Our tone of voice communicates often far more than the words. So we're creating an environment where people feel welcome, where people are more likely to respond positively and reveal who they really are. And once the verbal communication then starts, then our language and how we express ourselves, our body language, and aligned with that, can create that a deeper element of trust, an environment of trust, where again we reveal more of ourselves, they reveal more of themselves, and then we get into performance. Then we get into what's actually required here. I hope that answers the question, Ed.
There's a mountain of information, and so good, and beautiful slides. Thank you. Let me ask you a question. If somebody in the interview or on your team one day exhibits some erratic behavior or response, that could be alarming and could be frightening, but also could be just simply disappointing. And it's like, yuck, what is going on here?
If it's the interview
And then
panel,
responding, and then how do you respond? My God, you go into a room and shut the door because you don't want to be around that, right?
I haven't come across it in an interview panel, but if it did, I would say let's take a break here, and you have to get out of the room straight away, and then you have to either ask the person to exit, because you can't hold the interview for any kind of prolonged period. So you may have to ask the person to leave. And you probably don't have time to replace them, so you have to carry on otherwise. But like I said, I haven't experienced it, but that's what I would do. If it's a team within the company, then it's a different scenario, because you've got procedures in place to actually address that. But if the behavior suddenly becomes there's so many it depends aspects to the question. Is the team leader alert? Because generally speaking, I don't think people will start to behave erratically suddenly. There will be clues, there will be signs, and the team leader should be trained to be alert. And that's one big problem in a lot of organizations, that there isn't enough training, there isn't enough mentoring. But if the behavior becomes erratic, then there have to be clear procedures in place that you take the person aside. You ideally will have HR people trained to speak with them, and in a secure place where they don't feel under threat, where they know that you've already cultivated that element of trust in the organization, so that they feel free to speak. And you have whoever is speaking with them has to be trained in how to speak, how to listen, especially not to overspeak, but how to listen and how to demonstrate empathy in their behavior. And once you've elicited to at least some degree what the problem is, what caused the behavior, then you can start thinking about further steps. But even then, you should have those steps built into your procedures.
Ken and Paul, have at it.
Absolutely. Just to hitchhike onto Joseph's point, is to keep in mind the nonverbal aspects of communication, because I might, if you just look on paper, be saying all the right stuff, but non-verbally, it might be the pace of my speech, it might be my eye contact, I'm distracted, I'm doing this, I'm throwing up all kinds of interference components of the communication process that are going to undermine the effectiveness of the discussion. So you certainly want two-way communication, but to look at what you're saying as well as how you're presenting it. You're talking really fast. I really want to make sure that we understand the same. And I can be saying all the right stuff, but I can be saying it so fast that why is he rushing me? What are we going through? Does he really care about what I say? Or, yeah, I care about what you say. Oh, not with my hand here, I don't. And just to be aware of all these distractions that can come into it, even the setting in terms of where we're doing it. Am I taking phone calls? Yeah, I'm really interested in what you're, hold on. Yeah, I'm really interested in what you're saying. Yeah, right. all of those factors that can interfere. We're trying to have an open, honest, empathetic, two-way conversation with the person. There's information that we do want to glean accurately, and it's not going to come if I'm not aware of the how of what's going on in this communication process. So it really is to be as observant and as respectful and as fair as you can be in this process. And there's so many distractions that can come in when we're communicating with people. It's so important to be aware of the how as well as the what.
Paul?
Yeah, Ken, I totally agree. I totally agree with everything you just said. But Joseph, I'm going to take a different perspective on what you're talking about. I am your disciple, Mr. McGuire. I just want to let you know the article that you had written that I reposted on LinkedIn not too long ago about heart-based leadership changed my world. I'm not kidding. What you're publishing out there is you're able to find the scientific proof that talks about how the heart generates who we are and what we do and how we think. The idea of empathy being, like, to me, the key human denominator that tells me how evolved a soul is. And I'm not kidding. That's really how I look at it. And what you're able to do is you're able to say, listen, it's proven. Here's how it's proven. And we're not just doing this all from the head, it's actually the heart. And not only that, but the heart's taking the lead because the heart was formed first. And the heart creates this field and this impression that I read this stuff. I'm not kidding. It took me back, Joseph, to the Bible. You know, when the picture of the saints had the circle around their heads, the theory was that the body contained the soul. But when you look at it differently, it's actually the soul that contains the body. It's bigger than the body. It's out there beyond the body. And so whether we want to interpret this as body language or the empathy in the eyes, the ability to listen with your eyes and your heart, in addition to your ears, makes all the difference in human connection. And I'd never read that until I read your stuff. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's all there. You found kind of like the secret to life. You really did. And I'm not exaggerating. This is how much this stuff influences me. So I'm your biggest fan. I love what you're doing. Keep doing it out there because to the degree that people see that, they'll develop who they are, not just what they do. Who they are is the primary denominator. That's when you can tell a great leader. It's about their character and their caring. That comes from the heart. Trust, respect, the ability to build interpersonal relationships, selfless leadership. The leader is coach model. All this stuff comes from the heart. And I think we make a mistake sometimes. We think it's all in the head. But when it comes to leadership, heart is so critical. Thank you for pulling that together in scientific terms so we can actually see how it influences our day-to-day lives.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, deeply moved. Bless you.
What a show. I've learned so much from you guys and the ladies who were on previously. Ken?
If we could
I'm
only,
almost speechless here, so I want you to talk.
I'm just saying, if we could only see more of these qualities in leaders, not only in business organizations and not-for-profits, but in leadership, and I will say around the world. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we felt this way about world leadership right now, and those are in key positions that are impacting where this whole planet is going, to have the kind of leadership that we're talking about, that Paul and Joseph have mentioned, would frankly, we talk about all the stress that's going on and distractions, how much better we would feel about where this world is going for our children and grandchildren if the leaders were demonstrating and possess the kinds of qualities that are being spoken of by Joseph and Paul today. I would sure feel a lot better and a lot less distracted and stressed, and having to practice less mindfulness because of all the stuff that's going on out there today. But if we could somehow move this kind of thinking into these positions, what a better world it would be.
Amen. Amen.
Sounds like Louis Armstrong's song, Wonderful World it could be.
Yeah.
With that, thank you, Joseph. You're a star.
Ah.
You're a guiding light.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys. Thank you. I'll be
Thank you.
sending this out later today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, guys.
Take care, everybody. Be well.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.